Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. The Hangar Z Podcast has extensively talked about the two primary challenges facing public safety aviation: politics and funding. We've dedicated considerable time to discussing the political aspects of this equation. In this two-part series, I discuss the challenges and solutions related to funding aircraft and mission equipment for law enforcement agencies with experts Ed Vanwinkle and D.C. Greer. The conversation delves into the intricacies of aircraft financing, the importance of education for new aviation leaders, and the creative solutions for acquiring necessary equipment. D.C. Greer is the Senior Vice President of Government Capital Corporation, a nationwide public finance company headquartered in Southlake, Texas. With over 30 years in public finance, his efforts have been focused largely in the public safety sector. D.C. served in the U.S. Army and is a graduate of Northwestern State University in this city that I'm going to attempt to say, Natchitoches, Louisiana. During our conversation, Ed Vanwinkle reflects on his over 20 years of service at the Gainesville Police Department in Florida, where he retired as a captain. His diverse roles included aviation, narcotics, detectives, patrol, SWAT, and training. He served as the narcotics unit commander, SWAT commander, and unit commander of the Joint Aviation Unit with the Volusia County Sheriff's Office. After retiring, Ed spent 9 years as the law enforcement sales manager at Airbus Helicopters and is now the vice president of law enforcement and OEM projects for CNC Technologies. He's also an active commercial helicopter pilot, flight instructor, and fixed-wing pilot. This conversation also delves into the advancements in aviation technology, particularly focusing on the integration of CNC life systems and the bidirectional flow of information that enhances operational efficiencies for aircrews. This is an important episode for anyone in public safety aviation, but especially for those in a position seeking funding solutions to purchase new aircraft or mission equipment. Thank you to our sponsors, Precision Aviation Group, CNC Technologies, and Garmin.
Welcome to the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicasts. The Hangar Z Podcast is the first and only podcast dedicated to promoting and exploring the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation.
Still southbound, skidding to a stop. Stand by here. Looks like you're getting ready to bail. Heads up, guys, bailing. Okay, the guy, he's running through the house, jumping the fence, through the shotgun, through something out. Grabbing the shotgun. Don't go over that fence. Don't go over that fence. Grab the shotgun again. He is armed. Stay there. Hold your position.
We've talked about, or you guys have brought the term tax-free. Did you call it tax-free government lease,
No,
or just
tax-exempt?
Tax-exempt lease. Can you give us the thumbnail of what that means for folks that are listening?
Yeah, when you and I go to the bank, we pay. It's called a commercial rate. Okay, there the tax-exempt rate is absent of the federal tax portion of the rate. And the reason they can apply for that is you have to be a political subdivision, which means you have to be able to levy a tax, and you have police powers. Because those are the two of the most important things. You and I, we don't have that. So we have to pay, and Ed goes to the title, cash for title. So he doesn't have any credit, but that's the typical person that goes to the bank. They pay that commercial, whatever that rate may be. Municipalities and political subdivisions are exempt from that portion of the rate, which a lot of times makes it more economically feasible for them to fit that payment into their budget.
Okay. We talked about how that funding source isn't just for new aircraft purchases. Can you talk about where those things apply and what people what equipment they could fund essentially through that?
Yeah, it is, and it's a very wide range. And the best way to describe it is any essential use equipment that is relative to the mission of the agency. We finance the searchlights, we finance avionics, the cameras. We could do sometimes used aircraft. If they need new rotor blades, you can do that. Anything that is essential to the operation of the agency can be considered for financing. And it's all expensive, and that's what makes it difficult sometimes to purchase those. Even a refresh, I think at 10 years or so, or whenever that was, Ed, that can be very, very costly. Okay, so you can take a look at financing those, because a lot of times unless they save for it or set monies aside for it, it's a chunk of change. They can't come out of the budget with it and pay cash.
Yeah.
So it's very flexible for mission equipment with operation of an agency.
Especially in an economy like we find ourselves potentially going into with declining revenues and those types of things, it's great to know there's other funding sources available other than the traditional funding source that most people think of. Ed, from your perspective, what have you seen? How has this been a benefit to the community that, as compared to the traditional funding source that we typically consider?
I think the benefit of the tax-exempt financing is that it gives agencies options. Mm-hmm. And it could be an option, and we'll start on the small end. Let's say you want to buy, $500,000 or $700,000 imager, or you want to replace your whole mission suite for $1.2 million, or you have an A-star and you need a 12-year inspection that's going to cost $400,000, and maybe at the same time you're going to repaint it and redo all the avionics. And so, or as big as we're going to buy a new helicopter, a new airplane that could cost, $6 or $7 million for either one of those. One thing that I was involved in early in my Airbus career, when LA County Sheriff's Department got out of their MD fleet and got into their fleet of AS350 B2s, Jim DiGiovanna was the captain over aviation. And the way they purchased the first fleet of 15 A-stars was through a tax-exempt lease purchase. And the concept was, we're going to, instead of buying 15 aircraft outright, we're going to pay them off over a 7-year period. Come 7 years, we can then replace the fleet for an incremental amount more. And so, once that, what I like to say is this type of financing does initially increase, the perceived cost of flying, because, when you own a machine outright, you're paying for inspections, fuel, oil, that sort of thing. But once you get that payment built into the budget, and, aircraft, what I like to say is the ideal time to replace aircraft is in the 7 to 10 year range, 10 being on the outside, just because that's when the value of the used machine tends to level out. And after that period of time, both unscheduled maintenance goes up, which means your maintenance costs are more, and you're not going to get a great value of trade-in for that machine. Not that there's not value, but there's not as much. And so if you have a 7 or 10 year lease, you have that payment built into the agency's budget. And so let's make up a number. And I know, DC, you put together an example, but let's say you finance it for 10 years and your payment's $500,000 a year. Well, maybe when that period, and you got to work on this a little in advance, right? A year or so in advance, because you're going to have to, there's lead time for all the equipment and everything else. But let's say you hit year 9 and say, okay, we're going to now order a replacement machine. Well, that $500,000 payment may have gone up to $650,000 a year, but it's not a huge increase. And so you almost build in a fleet replacement plan by using this type of financing. And you can do the same thing for mission equipment. When we were prepping for this session, John, if you remember, I talked about how agencies really need to have 2 different plans. One replacement plan for their mission equipment, which when you start hitting 5 years, you start getting some obsolescence. 7 years is probably ideal. 10 years, you're on the outside of, should we keep using this because the technology is so new and you may not even get your equipment serviced. I worked with the state of Massachusetts when Massachusetts State Police wanted to both replace their 4 EC-135s, but had aging imagers on all of those aircraft. And so what we did was we built a concurrent plan. One plan was we need to upgrade these imagers, the monitors, and several other things. And at the same time, we're going to make a plan to replace the aircraft. And sometimes you'll have concurrent plans. And that doesn't mean that you can't finance these separately. You can, but you may finance them together. It may be for the mission equipment, you're able to use contraband forfeiture or use grant funds or something like that. But you either have to go to capital funding from the agency or use some financing in order to pay for it. And that's you're back to your question. What would I tell unit bosses when they come in? Well, yes, of course, everyone wants to, leave the thumbprint on the unit, and they want to leave it better off than when they got there. But you really have to understand how this stuff works, because if you just walk into the chief's office 2 weeks after you start in aviation and say, hey, here's a bill for a new $7 million H-125 or 407, they're going to laugh you out of the office. But if you come in with a plan, and it may take 2 or 3 years to get to that plan, but here is our plan, realizing that, you got to start talking in terms of fiscal years. Is your agency on a July 1, an October 1, or a January 1 fiscal year? And how far in advance do you have to start planning to become part of the budget? How many times do you have to ring the bell? One thing about my job with CNC is, especially through the microwave and other video downlink technologies, when the big bosses can see bad guys getting caught, pursuits in progress, people being arrested, that's the lubrication that funds the process. To them, if they can't see the video, if the downlink's broken, they say, why is the helicopter broken? The helicopter's working fine.
Yeah.
We just can't transmit live. We'll give you the video when we land. But they get addicted to that. And of course, in the advent of real-time crime centers and a lot of the technology-based things, and also with drones are also a feature of airborne law enforcement that the bosses really like to see. And so the more of it they can see and use, the easier it is to get funding. It was probably at least, I think 6 years ago now, we met with the city of Dallas. At the time, they had 2 Jet Rangers, one FLIR on one of their aircraft that didn't work, one that sometimes worked. And they were, in their own words, relatively ineffective at catching bad guys because it's binoculars and it's flying as low as they can over the city of Dallas, which was not really that safe to have to get down that low to be able to see. And fast forward a few years, we upgraded both of the Jet Rangers with new avionics, new MX-10s, new downlink, new search, the whole thing. And now all of a sudden it's, the bosses can't get enough watching the video. If they can't see the video, there's a problem, right? And so, but that helped them get, they ended up getting a 407 donated to them by the Ross Perot Jr. family, and they're in the process of working on funding to upgrade to some newer aircraft. So it can take many years to happen, but you have to, again, if you're a uniboss, you should be thinking out 3, 5, and 7 years, not just what's happening next week.
Yeah.
You really have to plan ahead. And if you're not asking for more money or for upgrades to equipment, then you're really not doing your job.
Yeah. I want to go down this rabbit hole for a minute, because I think about what you just said. The successful units are doing what you're saying. They're producing a product that's superior. They're not only producing it, but they're showing it to the higher ups, creating the political goodwill that you need to pursue new aircraft acquisitions, new mission equipment, all the things that we're talking about. I think of Leon County, I think of Nashville PD, a lot of agencies out there doing good work. They're transmitting that stuff via downlink that we're talking about. And, my agency, Ontario, did a really good job of kind of being, in my mind, at least, in the forefront of using the downlink technology to our benefit. You talk about, watch commanders and chain of command getting really addicted to seeing what's happening either on pursuit or tactical situation or whatever. When that downlink didn't work, which unfortunately in our case happened frequently, and I'll get to that in a second, they ask, well, what's going on? They get frustrated that they can't see what's happening in the field. They're not getting that actionable intelligence that they've gotten accustomed to seeing from the aircraft. And I'll throw my city's IT department under the bus here for a minute. I think we as a city tried to go on the cheap and have our own IT folks develop this internal system to disseminate the downlink feed through the city to people that should be viewing it. And in doing so, we created a lot of problems that we weren't aware that we were doing. I think I know that the IT folks weren't doing it on purpose, but I think when I look at CNC and what you guys are doing through CNC Live and the headaches that alleviates on the technology side, and then again going to the other side where the higher ups and the chain of command are looking at that and getting the actionable intelligence that they want, it's huge. Can you talk about that a little bit and kind of what you're seeing in that part of the world?
Thanks to our sponsor, Garmin. The Garmin GI 275 digital flight instrument is now approved for MD-500 helicopters, giving operators the ideal upgrade option for replacing obsolete mechanical gauges with reliable solid-state electronics. Get details at garmin.com/GI275heli.
CNC's core competency started and has continued to be in the transmission of video and data from the air down to the ground. And even just the microwave technology, there's so many different companies that make different equipment. One thing I love about our company is that we don't make anything. And so we can choose the best product in the industry to promote to our customers. And if we don't like what that technology is, we can go to the vendors and say, you need to make this better, or can you add this to this? And so we don't have the risk of someone coming out with a better mousetrap. So when I started with the company, most of our business was downlink related. And I would go and they would be, to put the Troll downlink system in most aircraft at the time was $150,000, $175,000, about the same amount for a receive site. And what we found was that some of the challenges aren't just the downlink technology, but it's working with the IT departments. Because what happens with that feed when it hits the ground, it has to go somewhere. And most agencies have their own video management system, and that's fine. But as soon as you put this very high def video, and I'm not a tech guy, so I'm not going to speak in the technical terms, but when you put the high def video feed into something that's not used to taking that much information, it can really shut down the city or the county system, right? And so luckily, our technical staff not only knows the downlink equipment, but then we developed into where we're selling the entire mission suite. And so not only do they know the downlink equipment, they know the moving maps and the monitors, the thermal imagers, and all of it together. And so we can diagnose problems, make sure that the equipment stays operational once it's delivered. One thing, I loved working at Airbus, and we would deliver fully capable operational aircraft. But making sure that that technology works with the infrastructure you have at home is a whole other ball of wax. With CNC, not only do we make sure that it works when it is delivered, we make sure it continues to work when it gets back home. Now, talking about CNC Live, what we found is that many of the agency's video management systems just couldn't handle the amount of video and the bandwidth that was coming down. So we developed CNC Live, which is a secure web-based portal that does not go through the agency's video management system. So as soon as it hits the ground, it goes straight up, which helps with a couple things. One, it's a secure Amazon government server, so it's completely safe. It's the same thing that the federal government uses. It also reduces latency. When you go through your own system, latency or delay is introduced. And the more live that video is, the more tactically useful it is. But if you have patrol sergeants, lieutenants, captains who are on a major incident scene and they're trying to make decisions on video that's 12 or 15 or 20 seconds old, that's not helping anybody. In fact, it could be putting someone in danger because it's not live video. We're in our second iteration of CNC Live, and we're actually replacing servers at most of our customers' locations for the new iteration. But something else is happening in the industry too. With the advent of cellular-based systems, microwave is great, but the systems are expensive. And some agencies who may not have the budget to be able to, if you have two aircraft and want one receive site, it could cost you $600,000 or more for those systems. And so now many companies, including CNC, are offering cellular-based solutions that use typically 2 or 3 SIM cards, a different assortment of antennas. One of the challenges with cell service is that if you look around your own city or county, you can see the antennas on the towers are pointed down, they're angled downward. And so it makes it more difficult from an aircraft that's at 1,500 feet or maybe higher to be able to transmit down and keep that signal. So the secret sauce in those systems is the quality of the antenna on the aircraft. In the more rural areas, those antennas, I won't say they can't more up, but they can't less down, if it makes sense. So we found even in rural areas, we get great signal. The only thing, though, that happens during a critical incident or a major event like the Super Bowl is that typically you won't have the cell coverage because there's so many phones operating there that cell isn't always the most reliable. But I think what it can give agencies is a solid 80 to 85% solution that's going to do, more often than not is going to work for you without as big of an expense, because those systems per aircraft are, well below $100,000, and they're easier to keep going with the technology that's out there. The last thing that's happening, which is probably the most exciting, but we're not sure exactly how it's going to work out, is Starlink. Because Starlink, there's now a certified solution for Cessna Caravans and Pilatus PC-12s. And so, it's better than, go in flight when it comes to the amount of bandwidth that you get. There are some agencies that literally are getting the much smaller antenna that they can put up in the dashboard. That's not a permanently mounted or an FAA certified solution, but if it's not permanently mounted, you don't need a certified solution. You can put one on a RAM mount. So that's going to change how the industry works as far as technology, only because you can kind of go out and buy that yourself. Now, how you integrate that into your systems is a different story. Because the antennas aren't quite as well developed, they're also not quite as for the helicopters, because you're transmitting through blades, and transmitting through metal blades is a different thing than transmitting through composite blades. So there's still a lot of bugs to be worked out. But what CNC has provided that many of our customers really like with CNC Live is that it takes the transmission of the video off the agency's server. Doesn't mean that they can't put it on it, but many agencies that use CNC Live, there'll be a direct feed into their EOC or the real-time crime center, but to get it out to everybody else, it goes through CNC Live. A complicating factor to that is that Axon, who most agencies use if they have body-worn cameras, and Axon is also integrating drone video. That's how the video for many agencies is managed. And we don't have an agreement with them yet where we can either sell their system or they can use CNC Live. And so that's been a little bit of a barrier, because some agencies, they'll buy their whole video infrastructure from Axon and use that for their real-time crime center. And it's a very good system. We're not saying that it's not, but it makes it a little more difficult to use CNC Live, because that's a different system that some agencies use. But I think because technology is changing so fast, it's taking time for us to figure out what's the best way to use it. And I think because it's going to continue to go quickly, agencies will have to have multiple solutions.
Yeah. One of the things you talk about that's exciting to me is the bidirectional flow of information. So, with downlink, you're used to sending information to the ground and not as familiar with receiving information that's helpful for us as air crews. And you start talking about plate readers and real-time crime centers and all the data that provides a TFO or an air crew. That's where, in my mind, this bidirectional flow of information is going to really revolutionize how air crews can become proactive in their day-to-day mission set, which is really exciting for me. You brought up one more point that I want to touch on before we go back to DC for a few questions. You talked about Super Bowl. I know you guys were able to utilize the CNC Live program for one of the recent Super Bowls to provide that actionable intelligence for all the agencies involved. What it highlights for me is not just a Super Bowl or a large event like that. What it highlights for me is a natural disaster, a terrorist incident, something that's catastrophic, where you have a ton of agencies that are now flooding your municipality, your governmental agency of some sort, and you're wanting to share information with them. When you have your own internal IT program, from my own experience, it'd be really challenging to share, like, hey, here's to the leader of the next agency over, here's how you could log in and access this information from our aircraft. Whereas, correct me if I'm wrong, Ed, with CNC Live, you can grant access to whoever you need to have access to those feeds. So it could be the director of another agency, a federal agency. It could be the National Guard. It could be whoever you want to have access to that CNC Live program. it's as easy as basically giving them the permissions that are needed. Is that correct?
That's correct. You can make it as small as these 3 people, these specific email addresses can have access, or you can say, we're going to give it to the whole state of Louisiana. If your email address ends in la.gov, as long as you have the password, you can log in. What we did with the Super Bowl in New Orleans this year, Jefferson Parish Sheriff's Office is one of our customers and has been for several years. We put up their receive site and also did the completion on their Bell 429 with Arrow Brigham. And so we've been working with them for years. We're about to deliver the second through PHI in Lafayette, Louisiana, their second 407 to Louisiana State Police. So the first machine was coming out literally the week of the Super Bowl. And so we were able to set up that Louisiana State Police could transmit into a portable receiver that we set up on a rooftop. Jefferson Parish was able to transmit into their own receive site. And then we had our entire technical team was in Louisiana for a week and at no charge to our customer. And we set up so that the feeds from all the federal agencies were going through CNC Live as well. So all the bosses from the major entities were able to see all of the aircraft video at one spot. Now, they may have been able to see it on their own feed through their own pipe, whatever they're doing, but we were able to put it in one location so everybody could see it. And we've done that at multiple Super Bowls, Boston marathons, every year in the Gulf when it's hurricane time. When hurricanes start popping up, we'll set up a disaster feed for either the state of Florida or for the Gulf region, because we can go from, all the way from Naples, Collier County, all the way around into Texas with agencies that we're working with. So not only is our technology flexible, but we will adjust and help agencies. And again, this is just part of our service. We don't charge you a special event fee. If you're a customer and something's happening, we'll support it as long as we have a little bit of notice.
Yeah, I think the unified command situations, again, natural disaster, terrorist event, pre-planned event like the Super Bowl, anything like that, where you're inviting a bunch of agencies into your location to try and share information is always challenging, whether it's radio comms or video feeds or whatever. So anything that I think that we can do to simplify the sharing of information is critical. And I love what you guys have done with CNC Live. So thanks for running through that with me. I know that was kind of unintended rabbit hole, but I think it's important to consider as we start planning and mentally think through our responses to large scale incidents. So DC, for you, I guess my question kind of circles back to how do we fund these things when it comes to, an agency who maybe they have aircraft that they don't want to replace, but we've got mission equipment that they want replaced now, whether it's what we're talking about with downlink or a new camera system. What does that look like to fund just the replacement of mission equipment itself?
Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com.
Yeah, it falls under the tax exempt lease purchase financing, and the structure is typically geared to the life of the product. You get into technology, and there are terms of 3, 5, or maybe 7 years, and they own it at the end. Another feature that's important is that they don't necessarily. I ask this all the time. I get asked this: do I have to have a down payment? And I never create a financing proposal where they have to have a down payment, because typically they don't, because there are other needs and they have other uses for the money. It's a very, but you start out by providing the name of the agency, what is the equipment, how much is it going to cost, and then tailor and initiate a preliminary term sheet so that they can take a look and see if that would fit their budget. Most every time, one of the key features is, because of budgeting, is that we can do annual, semi-annual, quarterly, or monthly. But about 80% of the features that we use as far as when the first payment is annual payments, because we can put that first annual payment up to 1 year plus. If it's on an aircraft, we can put that first payment up to 2 years. Okay, lock in the rate, lock in the financing. But if it's the equipment, the same thing. We fund it 100%, offer them upfront example of what they could look for. And back to to Ed's point when he was talking about responsibility, I think it's really important, because somebody in that agency is responsible for finding out we don't have the money to pay cash, or we have money to pay cash, but we may have that allocated for another. And I think it's vitally important to equip that person that is responsible for sharing what options are out there, equip him with the simplicity of what is available, and he has a budget to go by. They all have this budget pool of money, so if they can get that initial proposal, they can see where that payment may fit into the budget. And then they're able to take that to the next step up the ladder and say, you know what, I know we don't have $500,000 for this camera system, or this searchlight, but you know what, we don't have to have $500,000. We can break that down into segments of maybe five annual payments. And by the way, that first payment's not due until our next budget year.
Yeah.
So you really give them a game changer. It could be a game changer for them in their thinking, because they need the equipment. We just got to find out a way to get it. They have to find out. So we can help them to do that by engaging in the process and giving them numbers in the process that they can say, well, you know what, we can't afford this. We may not find the cash. Okay, we can afford a payment.
Yeah.
And that's a day-to-day business that we do, is trying to find out what do they need and what do we need to do to break it down to a simple payment option that they can handle within their budget and still operate their agency.
Yeah, I think it's also important to consider, we talked about declining economies and where that might land some of these grant programs that currently exist. A lot of agencies, I think, are relying upon a lot of those grants to fund the replacement of mission equipment, downlink systems, whatever those things might be. So great to have a conversation with you guys and coming up with some alternatives to those solutions, because those could very well disappear as time goes on. Whether it's politically through the DOGE type things that are taking place, looking at some of these grants that might be available and that could potentially disappear, or just through
the other thing is that even if they got a grant, and for a portion of it, we have the capability of picking up the portion in the grant that was not funded through it. Okay, so they got some free money there that helped them out, but that's important, because it would be could be a lot more debt service that would even fit better into their budget.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of flexibility.
Yeah. Before we end, I want to go down one more rabbit hole. We've got two experts in this. So Adam, I'm going to pick your brain here for a minute. When it comes to new aircraft purchases, a lot of agencies that have existing programs kind of know what kind of mission equipment they want, but there's almost an endless list of things that you could potentially add to your aircraft, to your mission set, that you think might make your program more efficient, more effective, and produce results that help you down the road. I remember in my time in Ontario, getting a chance to go on Hangar 1 and kind of go through what the interior of the aircraft should look like. Brand new TFO, giving input on what head jacks should go where and what mission equipment we might want here and there. It was a really cool process. You guys have kind of refined that through CNC, kind of designing what the ergonomics and where the mission equipment should lie within the aircraft. Can you give folks some advice on, defining the mission and how they're selecting things and how they're kind of determining where some of these displays should go, where some of the hand controllers should go, and what that looks like?
It's time for your Heli Life giveaway buzzword. Listen up and remember this word, because you'll need it to enter for a chance to win exclusive Heli Life gear. Ready? This episode's buzzword is Black Hawk. Visit contest.verticalhelicast.com to enter the buzzword.
Sure. When you use the words, because our company motto, CNC's company motto is define the mission, design the mission suite, and then deliver the completed product. But whenever you're talking as a salesperson, whenever you're talking to bosses and you say, well, we need to define your mission, it sounds like sales speak.
Mm-hmm.
But we literally have to know, what are you trying to accomplish? Are you going to use this Cessna Caravan to do, drug surveillances at 10,000 feet? And we might recommend a certain imager or a certain TFO console, or you're doing, police patrol missions at 700 to 1,000 feet. That would be a different imager and maybe a different setup depending upon which aircraft you're going to buy. So one thing that's great about our company is that we're agnostic to which manufacturer. As much time, I sold about 125 A-stars to law enforcement agencies. And every time I sit down in a Bell 407, because I do some flight instruction on the side, my Airbus guys are like, they're texting me, dude, what are you doing? Stop posting pictures of you in a 407, But I love them all. They're great machines. What we care is, what does the customer want? What does it look like? So, we've done many different completions with many completion vendors, whether it's Hangar One Avionics, Metro Aviation, Pack Up in Pennsylvania, Metro Golf. They bought avionics solutions down in Lafayette. And so Metro Golf has more capabilities than Metro in Shreveport. We've just done some deals recently with PHI, also in Louisiana. They did Louisiana State Police, and we're working on a few others. Southeast Aerospace down in Florida, coastal Florida. Many others. I'm not trying to, if I left any out, I apologize. But each one of these companies has done so many different integrations. And so we try to first show the customer what the options are. And what we recommend is go and visit some of these people who bought these aircraft. If you go to APSA or you go to Verticon and you look at you sit in the aircraft and you can say, hey, I like this. But, look, you got one shot to make your aircraft correct. It may be the only new aircraft your agency purchases for 10 years. And there's no reason to do that yourself. The homework has already been done. But there are many agencies who will say, oh, no, we've got to have it this way. This is the only way to do it. There is no only way to do anything. Right. And it really just comes down to how your TFOs work. For instance, California Highway Patrol, in the caravans that Hangar One has done for them, they've got a very large TFO console that has 2 monitors. It is fantastic, but it's also quite a big desk. It's a big space. And if you wanted to use that aircraft to convert between personnel transport versus surveillance missions, you may want a smaller console. So that's why you have to define what your mission is. Because often when you buy certain aircraft, there's what I call the unintended consequences. Yeah, we bought a surveillance aircraft, but guess what? The sheriff's got to go to Tallahassee. And so for a meeting with at the governor's office. So this aircraft's going to be used for both things. And you want to be able to have room for people. So we try to help our customers really figure out what they're going to use the aircraft for. When it comes down to it, there's a short list of companies that make imagers that agencies want to buy and monitors and moving maps. It really comes down to what we do is we'll refer them to customers who've been successful with the various products. Some of them are diehard FLIR, diehard Westcam. Now we've got Traca on the scene, and they're getting a big following and doing a great job with their new imagers and mapping systems. It really comes down to most agencies have usually a TFO. It could be a pilot who's their resident tech guy or gal. And they will research, talk to other folks. And then when it comes time, because you really need to know this stuff before you're going to go buy the aircraft. I highly recommend that unit bosses go to an APSCON or a Verticon before you write your requirements. And don't do it yourself, because when you try to build a budget, I've seen this 100 times, they'll go to the OEM and say, well, what's the base price for a new 407 or a new 125? That's a certain number. They don't realize how many airframe options are on every single machine that could add $200,000, $500,000, $700,000, depending on if you're going to put a hoist on it, putting a barrier filter. You can go down the list.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support.
Do that homework up front. I had a customer who they had gone and priced each piece of mission equipment separately, guessed on what it would cost to install, and they were almost $300,000 too low on their budget. And it makes them not look very smart to their bosses when they got to go back and say, oops, the real price came in much higher. Or they didn't realize I can't get a machine. Like, we did this exercise before this filming session where, I called it, it was primarily Bell and Airbus just to find out what is the lead time for a 407 or for an H125. And it's about a year for each machine. Then you can add about 4.5 months for completion. And so you've got to price that far out. Don't ask for this year's price, because you're not going to get it this year.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something that again, you have to be a sophisticated unit boss. And if we have a few minutes, John, I'd also like to play out the ways that you can purchase this equipment, because, some agencies, especially states, tend to be one check writers. And so they will put out a bid and they're going to say, we want an Airbus H125 or equivalent. There's not an equivalent when they write it that way. And with this mission equipment, and they want to write one check for it. And that works because that's just how the state does it. But there's many other customers, and actually it was the state of Texas who started this trend way back in the mid 2000s, where they split up the airframe and the completion. So they would buy the airframe from one vendor. It would go to bid, but they knew what they wanted. And then they would bid out the completion. And that system to this day on a helicopter tends to save a couple $100,000. It might be 175, it might be 250 or 300. It just depends. But economically, that is a good way to do business. It can be. You have to realize as a unit boss that as soon as you buy that basic airframe is when your warranty starts to tick. So if you fly low hours, but your warranty is ticking for 4.5 or 5 months during a completion, then you've lost some warranty during that time. Whereas if you buy it from the OEM, the warranty starts when the completed aircraft is delivered. So those are things that you have to factor in. But one thing I really like about being able to work with government capital, and DC and I went through this exercise before this show, is it allows for progress payments. Because it used to be that every OEM would just let the agency pay net 30 after the aircraft is delivered, and they could leave without paying a dime. Well, most OEMs won't do that. It's push come to shove, they may, but it's more likely that they're going to require a 10 or 20% down payment on the airframe. For instance, if CNC were the prime contractor, we would have to pay a down payment for the airframe. And then we would typically get a progress payment a few months before the completion starts, so we can order some mission equipment and put a deposit down with the completion center. Then we would pay the balance of the airframe when we take ownership of it. We try to, as soon as we take ownership, transfer that ownership to the agency who's buying it. And then there's another progress or payment maybe in the middle of the completion, and then one at the very end. And by working with government capital, it's funded right away. Once the project starts, it's funded, goes into escrow, and then money comes out of that. But that money also gains interest. So the escrow interest that's coming in also brings down the cost of the project a little bit, and can actually allow you to buy more mission equipment. So it's great working with government capital because they are so flexible. Now, they can still finance a fully completed helicopter or airplane without making progress payments if that's the deal that's made. But that's typically not the deal anymore. Most of the OEMs want at least a down payment for the aircraft, and sometimes want some more money throughout the progress of the project. So that's a benefit of working with government capital. Is they're very flexible that way.
Yeah, there's so much complexity that goes into this. I appreciate you guys taking time to go through some of the nuances involved, and again to give some folks some ideas on ways that they can fund these replacement cycles or new unit startups or whatever the thing is they're trying to fund in a way that they're maybe they hadn't thought of. Really educational. Really appreciate you guys doing that. Again, love what both of your companies are doing for the community, for our public safety aviation community. And again, just touching on where the economy is headed, I think we're potentially going down a road where money's going to be tight. So it's important to consider alternatives to where we currently stand. Thank you guys. Do you see anything in closing before we head out?
Yeah, we had talked a little bit about, I don't know how many new agencies want to start up, but we had briefly talked about a new agency and how could that be funded? And that's typical scenario is typical with a new fire district, for example. Okay, it can work the same. If you're going to have a new agency, you've got to have some means of revenue. It may be through a tax, it may be through millage or some funding source. And what you're able to do is, and you can calculate how much revenue you anticipate off of whatever resource that is to give you the funding. And so up front, we can calculate the mission equipment or the aircraft that you may need, and how would that work into the budget, even though the first years has not been collected, because you put that first payment out far enough after that first year, if it's a first year deal. So they don't have to, they don't have to wait around. We can potentially fund that. Okay. And you had also mentioned in one of our bullet points about in an economic turndown, if they're struggling, it can be economics, but it can also be economics from, for example, we had a fire district. Okay. It could just have been an aircraft, but they had over Louisiana, right across the river there. And we were going to do a new station for them. Okay. Well, unfortunately, a huge barge company, which paid a lot of revenue into that district, they went south and relocated. So when that happens, it's not that we want to operate a new fire station. So what you're doing, because that's one of the thoughts that have, well, what if our funding source doesn't keep pace with what our expenses and our obligations are? Well, if that happens, it's not that we go in and get the fire truck or the aircraft, but you find a way, because that's not going to last forever. Okay. So what you do, you have some conversation with them. Well, there's a difference in not wanting to pay for it, not having the ability to pay for it. So you assess what that may look like, and you may do an interest-only payment for the next payment, or maybe two payments, to allow them to get back on their feet, find those sources of revenue, or either pay off some obligations that they have that would fuel the payment, for the future obligations for what they purchased. So, you have to be a team player with them, because sometimes things like that can happen.
Right.
And they have to know that, they're not going to come in, with a SWAT team and take our stuff. That's all part of understanding the municipal market, and what you're able to do.
Right. So for folks that are listening that find themselves with a bunch of questions and they want to reach out to DC, how could they get in touch with you, and where could they find more information on what we're talking about?
Yeah, absolutely. They can reach me. The best way is on my cell phone. It's 601-754-5951. That's my cell phone. And my email is dc.greer, Greer, @govcap, GOVCAP, short for governmentcapital.com. dc.greer @govcap.com.
Awesome. Yeah. Again, thank you guys for shedding a light on a topic that I think most people don't have the experience of just even being through osmosis exposed to. It's a topic that unless you're a unit leader or somehow peripherally involved as a chief pilot or something, you just don't have access to. So I appreciate your guys' insight. Great conversation. Ed, anything in closing before we head out?
Very quickly, I would say if you're a new unit boss, use every resource you can if you're going to make a purchase. Exercise your contacts, whether it's the mission equipment manufacturer, the salesperson from the OEM, or me if you're working with a company like CNC. Give DC a call. This homework on these projects has been done, and there's no reason to start from scratch. You may have to customize it for your agency, for your needs, for your purchasing requirements for your agency. But this has all been done, and there are people that are happy to help you. One thing I can tell you about DC and myself, we're relationship people. We would love to sell you what we do. And if you don't buy a single thing, we'll still spend just as much time making sure you understand what you need.
Yeah.
Because we know that it doesn't always turn into a deal for our company, but it benefits the industry, and that's the kind of business that we do.
Yeah. Again, thank you for your insight. You brought up something we talked about AppsCon earlier. You have a couple of classes that are going to be presented at AppsCon. Is that correct, Ed?
I teach usually a couple blocks for the flight instructor refresher class, and then for the unit managers class, I teach a block on aircraft and mission equipment acquisition, and I talk briefly about leasing, but the literal process of starting from scratch, whether you're operating military surplus aircraft, used aircraft, or new aircraft, how to develop a fleet replacement plan. And so that's something that I do every year at AppsCon.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys again. Looking forward to seeing you both. Hopefully at AppsCon. DC, are you going to make it to AppsCon this year?
When and where is it?
That'll be in July in Phoenix, Arizona.
If you buy dinner, I'll come.
For sure.
Yeah, bring your jacket. It gets cold in Phoenix in July.
Yeah.
Thank you, John. I appreciate the invite, and I hope this reaches some needy people. And we're all about conversation and helping you to understand better what financing is and how it would how it could work to get you what you need.
Yeah, just in closing, one thing that Ed brought up that I'll reiterate is, I think our community is great for a lot of reasons, but one of is we don't need to reinvent the wheel. Like Ed said, the homework's been done already. DC and Ed have a lot of experience on figuring this stuff out. Don't feel like you should go unsupported with these processes. So reach out to myself, to Ed or DC, and we'll get you pointed in the right direction and help you with the projects. So thanks a lot, guys. And until AppsCon or something sooner, we'll catch you later.
You bet.
Thank you, John.
All right.
Thank you, John.
Thanks for joining us for this episode of the Hangar Z Podcast. Don't forget to like and subscribe to hear more stories that promote the personnel and equipment behind the missions in public safety aviation. Lastly, stand by for a message after a word from our sponsors. Cheers.
Thank you to our sponsor, Precision Aviation Group. Mission-critical operators and fleet managers rely on Precision Aviation Group as a worldwide leading rotor and fixed-wing MRO provider. PAG provides tip-to-tail solutions in 4 MRO segments: avionics, components, engines, and manufacturing DER services. A single point of contact gives you access to over 150 million in inventory globally, 24/7. Just call 800-537-2778. Precision Aviation Group. Others sell parts. We sell support. Thank you to our sponsor, CNC Technologies. CNC Technologies, serving law enforcement, government, and military markets with tailored mission solutions, system training, and live 24/7 support with CNC.live platform. Explore more at cnctechnologies.com. Thanks to our sponsor, Garmin. The Garmin GI-275 digital flight instrument is now approved for MD-500 helicopters, giving operators the ideal upgrade option for replacing obsolete mechanical gauges with reliable solid-state electronics. Get details at garmin.com/GI-275
Thank you for joining us for this enlightening episode of the Hangar Z Podcast, brought to you by Vertical Helicast and in partnership with Vertical Valor Magazine. Throughout our discussion, we've tackled the pressing challenges of funding in public safety aviation and explored effective solutions for acquiring aircraft and mission equipment. We also delved into the advancements in aviation technology, including the integration of CNC live systems, highlighting how these innovations improve operational efficiency for air crews. This episode is crucial for anyone engaged in public safety aviation, particularly those seeking funding strategies for new aircraft and mission equipment. If you found value in today's discussion, we encourage you to leave us a rating and review, as your feedback helps us continue to provide insightful content and reach a wider audience.